Welcome and thank you for joining us as we introduce you to the PFF Registry and the Care Center Network. I'm Jessica Shore and I serve as the Vice President of Research and Programs at the PFF and support the Care Center Network. Dr. Kevin Flaherty is a professor of medicine in the Division of Pulmonary and Critical Care Medicine at the University of Michigan and is also the director of the Interstitial Lung Disease Program there. Dr. Flaherty is the steering committee chair for the PFF Registry. Junelle Speller serves as the Vice President of the PFF Registry, overseeing the strategy, marketing, and operations of the registry. Dr. Sonja Danoff is an Associate Professor of Medicine in the Division of Pulmonary and Critical Care Medicine at Johns Hopkins Medicine and co-director of the Interstitial Lung Disease Program. She is a medical advisor, senior medical advisor, and steering committee chair for the PFF Care Center Network. At this time, we would like to introduce you and start off with the PFF Registry.
Hello, my name is Kevin Flaherty, and I'm going to give you an introduction to the Pulmonary Fibrosis Foundation Registry and Care Center Network. So my name is Kevin Flaherty. I'm a professor of medicine in the Division of Pulmonary and Critical Care Medicine at the University of Michigan. And I have the fortune of being the steering committee chair for the Pulmonary Fibrosis Foundation Registry. For many years, I've had the opportunity to work with a lot of very talented individuals doing research on clinical trials related to pulmonary fibrosis. You'll hear in just a few moments from Junelle Speller. She's the vice president of the Pulmonary Fibrosis Foundation Registry and has a wealth of experience both in the for and nonprofit arenas in healthcare, as well as management and a BA in biology from university. So I want to spend the bulk of the time talking about the registry and where we've been over the past 5 years, and then change it over to Junelle, who will talk about the excitement of where we're going. So one of the registry's goals was to support the Pulmonary Fibrosis Foundation vision, to increase the understanding of pulmonary fibrosis, enable better diagnostics and treatments, and have every patient be diagnosed quickly and receive very high quality care. So how is the registry trying to accomplish that? Well, it's collecting longitudinal data from patients with pulmonary fibrosis in a usual care setting. That differs from a clinical trial where their follow-up is prescribed. In a usual care setting, we might be able to tease out what types of care actually make a difference. As patients receive their care, that information is put into a database, and that allows researchers to look at potential causes, progression, treatment effects, and outcomes for pulmonary fibrosis. And again, using this registry data to try to improve our understanding of fibrotic lung disease and the care of patients. So what's in this registry as it started 5 years ago? Well, the registry was conducted at Pulmonary Fibrosis Foundation Care Center Network sites. And as patients were seen there and chose to enroll in the registry, clinical data were collected. And I'll show you in a second the types of clinical data. Importantly, patients also had the opportunity to participate in a biorepository where they could give a baseline sample of blood at enrollment to be used for future research. What were the inclusion criteria? Well, we were looking for subjects that were 18 years or older, had the ability to understand and sign an informed consent about the research, have interstitial lung disease with the diagnosis confirmed at the care center site, and importantly, anticipated long-term follow-up so we could see how things could potentially change over time. There were some types of diseases that were excluded either because they weren't interstitial lung disease, such as cystic fibrosis, or things like sarcoid or LAM, which were followed in other types of registries and advocacy groups. So what were collected? Well, detailed clinical information, such as demographics, medical family history, what medications are people on, lab and other test results, including recently COVID. Patients could give a blood sample into a biorepository. So we had the opportunity to look at DNA, RNA, serum and plasma proteins. We collected HRCT imaging studies. We collected the one that was obtained closest to the time of enrollment, and then 2 additional CT scans. We captured medical events such as lung transplant, acute exacerbation, hospitalizations, and mortality. And 4 patient-reported outcome responses, the short form 6D, the USD shortness of breath questionnaire, a cough questionnaire, and a fatigue severity scale. So what did the registry look like now? This is a snapshot of some of the data fields in what we call a dashboard from middle of August of 2021. You can see, like at the bottom left, that about 60% of the patients enrolled in the registry had idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis. You can break down how long they've been in the registry. And importantly, on the bottom right, we can see that there's been attrition from the registry, from unfortunately mortality or lung transplant, or just no longer being cared for at a care center network site. It's these type of information that are both sobering, but also speak to the importance of us continuing the registry, those things that Junelle is going to talk about in just a few moments. It takes a long time for a registry to mature and to be productive. If you can look at great examples of what registries can do, you can look to the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation, but you can also look to how long they've been at it. So this timeline, which was published in the Annals of American Thoracic Society about 5 years ago, shows that the CFF registry actually started in the 1960s. And you look over the decades, what you can see is both how data were collected, as well as the types of data that were collected evolved over time. So where are we in terms of the PFF registry in our timeline? Well, we started in 2016. March of 2016, the first patient was enrolled. It took just over a year, which is remarkably quick, to enroll 1,000 patients. And in that first year, the first abstract presenting data from the registry were presented. By 2018, June, the last patient, just over 2,000, were enrolled into the registry, a very rapid accrual and well ahead of schedule. And although the data were very naive and had yet to mature, we were already presenting 5 abstracts at the American Thoracic Society. And importantly, starting to develop collaborations. And the foundation and the registry partnered with the NIH and the cleanup study to aid with that execution of the trial. By 2019, we had additional abstracts. And in a grant that I'll talk about later in a project, we were successful to partner with the NIH and Three Lakes Foundation on the precision study, as well as develop industry collaborations to look at biomarkers in the Prolific project. I'll talk more about both of those in just a minute. In 2020, we started to see abstracts mature into manuscripts, and that's continued through January and up to present in 2021. So it's a relatively short timeline, just 5 years, but over those 5 years, the registry enrolled just over 2,000 subjects, saw abstracts being presented into manuscripts, and is developing very important and large collaborations with partners such as the NIH, industry, and Three Lakes Foundation to move this field forward. So let's talk a minute about ancillary studies. This slide is quickly becoming out of date because the number of ancillary studies that are being requested and approved to be done is increasing week by week, month by month. But the types of studies include basic translational, looking at biomarkers. There's clinical studies looking at the data in the registry, and studies analyzing patient-reported outcomes. And just a small snapshot from some abstracts and recent publications coming from the registry. So how do you go about participating in an ancillary study? Say you have an idea and you want to use the registry data or biospecimens. Well, it starts by completing a registry ancillary study proposal form, which can be found on the website, and I'll show you that link in just a second. That proposal is reviewed by the Data Coordinating Center and investigators, really to see if it's feasible and to make sure that there aren't tweaks that need to be made in terms of how the data might be analyzed, and also that someone else isn't already doing the same study. Throughout this process, you work with the Data Coordinating Center to execute data use agreements, material transfer agreements, to refine and establish the statistical analysis plan, and eventually analyze the data and help with preparing the manuscript. And this is a link to the application on the website. The last 2 things I want to share with you is a little bit more detail about the precision study. So again, this is a collaboration with the NIH and Three Lakes Foundation that's really looking at trying to see if there can be a personalized medicine approach to pulmonary fibrosis. In this study, it uses preliminary data from the Panther study that showed a certain gene variant in TALIP may have a favorable response to treatment with N-acetylcysteine, whereas other gene variants either could have a potentially harmful effect or no effect. This potentially favorable gene variant is present in about 25% of patients with idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis. So doing a de novo study where 3 out of 4 patients are going to be screen failures just by their genotype is daunting and very hard to accomplish. But by partnering with the registry, where many, many patients had already contributed blood samples, we could genotype those samples. And in those subjects that had the favorable genotype and had consented to participate in future research, we could contact them to see if they were interested in the precision study. So this study is already enrolling. Other aims of the study are to do deep phenotyping of blood transcriptomics and proteomics, genomics, to try to see if we can distinguish through those specimens IPF from other types of ILDs or help determine prognosis. Another exciting collaboration through the foundation and the registry is the Prolific Consortium. This is a consortium with industries working together to use the biosamples in the registry along with the registry data to see if assays could be developed that could help in the execution of clinical trials and potentially in the future clinical care. Initial assays are focused on biomarkers that look at epithelial damage, fibrosis, inflammation, and thrombosis. So in a few moments, I've tried to share with you where the registry has been in the past 5 years. 5 years can seem like a lot of time, but in terms of registry speak, it's relatively short. But I'm extremely excited about the registry has done in that 5-year period, both in terms of the data, biospecimens, and CTs that have been collected, the studies that are already published, the studies that are ongoing now, and perhaps most importantly, the collaborations that are starting to emerge with industry, the NIH, and Three Legs Foundation. So with that, I'm going to pass the baton to Junelle Speller, who's going to share the excitement and the plans for the next phase of the Pulmonary Fibrosis Foundation Registry. Thank you very much.
Hi, everyone. I'm Junelle Speller, Vice President of the Pulmonary Fibrosis Foundation Registry. Thank you for joining us today. I will continue from where Dr. Flaherty left off and talk more about the next phase of the PFF Registry. So the registry program aims will continue with the patient at the center to develop a more representative understanding of patients with pulmonary fibrosis in the United States. We will continue our focus on research to simulate research projects and assist in clinical trial recruitment. Most recently, within the past few years, we have also looked at practice patterns and trends as we try to gather data to improve the quality of PF across the country. Looking ahead, with the addition of the community registry, we will focus more on advocacy, utilizing the registry data to support legislative and other advocacy initiatives. And with the incorporation of the community, most specifically patients with PF, PF patients also who have received lung transplantation, and then also family members and caregivers, we want to be able to engage the community, unify, and energize all of the community around pulmonary fibrosis. So the PFF registry will continue with the Care Center registry, as Dr. Flaherty discussed. We'll have the clinical data that's uploaded into the database, as well as a subset of those patients who elect to give a biosample, a blood sample, and an HRCT scan at enrollment. The new community registry is limitless. It includes patients across all care center networks, outside of the care center networks as well, as we push into rural communities and community settings as well. We will have patients, family members, and caregivers input their data directly into an online portal, a secure online portal within their homes and at their leisure. Information will include medical care, medical treatments, use of various medications and oxygen, information on their diagnosis, and information about them. That survey will be administered once annually. And then throughout the year, either quarterly or biannually, we will administer sub-studies in which we can gather more in-depth information about specific topics. For example, a cohort of patients who may have CHP or information on risk and exposures. So Dr. Flaherty did delineate the basic structure of phase 1 of the registry. As we look ahead to phase 2, you can see that we'll have 2 databases, the Care Center Registry Clinical Database that we discussed, as well as the Community Registry database that I just mentioned. This time, the registry will be open to up to 68 care center sites, plus the wider community at large. So we're looking at 2,000 care center subjects with rolling enrollment, and then unlimited community subjects. Again, patients who've received lung transplants, family members, and caregivers. The structure of the survey, the registry will change a little bit more as we move to a different software with RedCap Cloud, and then we shift to a single IRB. We are also modifying the case report forms and the inclusion criteria, and we'll continue to have single blood draw for those in the care center network, and then also a HRCT scan. As mentioned, the inclusion criteria will change as we add 2 new criteria. We want confirmed participation in the PFF Community Registry. So everyone on the Care Center Registry side will also participate in the community side to input their data directly. We also need a spirometry reading for those care center subjects within the 3 months prior to enrollment. So for the community registry, we want to emphasize that joining and participating in the registry is easy. It's secure as we use the same medical security system as your clinic does. And then we want everyone to help move forward finding a cure for data. All data points are important as we shift towards finding a cure for this disease. And then for healthcare providers, the community registry provides an opportunity for all patients to contribute with no additional work for you. You can help recruiting for the PFF community registry in order to drive improvements in care, and then you can be a part of the solution for pulmonary fibrosis. And then finally, for our researchers, the registry will continue to offer a wealth of longitudinal data on the care center side and in the community side as we continue to amass various data points from all of our participants. PFF registry data is accessible, and then you can be part of the solution. There are further details on the PFF registry website at www.pffregistry.org. There you'll find information on the registry itself, further details focused on researchers, on sponsors, more information about those of us behind the scenes pushing forward the registry, and then most importantly for our community, for our patients, family members, and caregivers who participate in the PFF registry. If you are interested in joining the registry, you'll see a join button on the PFF registry site, but here you have the direct URL, www.pffibrosis.org, PFF registry/join. We encourage you to sign up today. Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Jessica Shore, and I'm going to be here with you for a little while to talk about the Care Center Network. And later on, Dr. Danoff will be joining me to talk and tell you a little bit more about what the Care Center Network is at the PFF. So we all know the mission of the Pulmonary Fibrosis Foundation is to bring resources and people together to provide access to patients for high quality care and lead resource for cure for people who are living with pulmonary fibrosis so they can have longer, healthier lives. The Care Center Network has a mission of having the field propel through optimizing diagnosis, patient-centered care, patient research, and education. And the vision that the Care Center Network has is that every patient will receive a prompt, accurate diagnosis and receive the highest quality care that is patient-centered. I'd like to introduce you to Dr. Joseph Lasky, who is our Chief Medical Officer at the PFF, and he provides a lot of guidance and oversight within the Care Center Network. He's also an acting physician and current physician at Tulane Medical Center, and we were happy to have him join the PFF in August. He works very collaboratively with our medical team. Now, Dr. Sonja Danoff is who you're going to be meeting in just a few moments, but we also work with other physicians that are still working in the clinic at the bedside caring for patients. And Dr. Joyce Lee works with us to try to ensure that we are providing the highest quality care across the Care Center network. Dr. Kevin Flaherty, that you had recently just heard from, also works with us, but specifically focusing on the registry. And Dr. Amy Case works with us as well, working on awareness and education of pulmonary fibrosis. So we are really lucky here at the Care Center Network and Pulmonary Fibrosis Foundation to be working with such a wonderful collaboration of physicians, the 5 of them coming together and working to continue to build out the Care Center Network. Now at the PFF, we have 2 staff members, myself, Jessica Shore, and I'll introduce myself a little bit more to you in just a moment, but we also have Aubrey, who's working with us as a coordinator. So the PFF staffs individuals to help collaborate the Care Center Network. I'm a nurse by training and have worked within research and providing clinical care to patients living with pulmonary fibrosis. I am lucky to have joined the pulmonary fibrosis in the last year to be able to continue to bring care and resources together across the country to improve the lives of those living with pulmonary fibrosis and their families. So I am here to talk about the Care Center Network. So the logic question is, what is the Care Center Network? Well, the Care Center Network are a group of medical centers that come together, there are 68 in total, who are dedicated to improving the lives living with pulmonary fibrosis. So what they do is they provide expert care for adult patients, which is important to identify that adult patients living with fibrotic lung diseases. So there's multiple types of pulmonary fibrosis or lung disease that they specialize in, but they all focus just on lung disease. And what's really unique about the 68 centers is that they have a multidisciplinary approach to deliver care. What multidisciplinary approach means is that there's multiple multiple providers that come together to provide care for just one patient at a time. And so there's going to be nurses, social workers, pharmacists, of course, the physician team, which also includes multiple types of a physician, such as the pulmonologist, who you typically see face-to-face in the clinic, along with radiologists, pathologists, and this whole big team wraps around to provide care to just those patients there in the clinic. And those multidisciplinary approach is so important because we know that pulmonary fibrosis needs many different specialties to be able to provide the best care. And all of those, that group of healthcare providers, make sure that there's research available at centers for you as a patient coming to their center, along with educational materials that are developed in collaboration with the PFF. And also we want to ensure that the local community is involved as well and is provided different programs, such as some of the support groups that are offered through in conjunction with the Care Center Network. So these 68 centers come together all across the United States to come together to build this network of really specialized care for those living with pulmonary fibrosis. I really like this map, which shows where are all the Care Center Network located, where are all these centers located. This also provides a little bit of history. So 9 centers were started in 2013, and currently we are at 68. We're trying to better understand from the Pulmonary Fibrosis Foundation, where should other Care Center Network healthcare centers be located, and also where could we collaborate better within the community providers. And there are many of the centers that are there across the country who may not yet be part of the Care Center Network or may not have the ability to meet our criteria to provide that care, but they still have excellent physicians and healthcare providers providing care to those living with pulmonary fibrosis. So right now we're working to better understand how to get more physicians and other healthcare providers involved within the care center network so we can have better outreach to more patients. Here's a current list of all of the care center networks. You saw that map just a second ago, but now when we actually deep dive, you can see there's a listing of all of the centers that come together to provide that specialized ILD care. So you might wonder, how can you find a center by your local, by your house, or for yourself, a patient, or a loved one? Well, on the website, our website, pulmonaryfibrosis.org, we have a Find Medical Care page. And on that Find Medical Care page, which there's a little snapshot on the bottom, I put my own zip code in and took a snapshot here. You can find the centers that are nearest to you. Now, if there isn't a center near to you, never fear. You can go ahead and call our help center, and they can help direct you to some of the other regional pulmonary fibrosis centers in your area, and you can provide your information to them, and they can all to the help center, and they can also send you educational materials from the PFF about pulmonary fibrosis. So I hope that you take some time to look through where we're located and where the care center network is nearest to you, and you might already be receiving care at one of the care center networks. So now I'm going to go ahead and have you be introduced to Dr. Sonja Danoff, who's going to continue to talk to you about what the Care Center Network does and some more of the actual network workings that we have to really improve that care provided to pulmonary fibrosis patients.
Thank you, Jessica. My name is Sonja Danoff, and I serve as a Senior Medical Advisor to the Pulmonary Fibrosis Foundation Care Center Network. I'd like to pick up on what Jessica has told you and try to provide a little bit more information about what the Care Center Network activities are. So let me start by talking to you about what our goals are in the Care Center Network. You saw in Jessica's slides the description of what our mission and vision are. And in order to get to a place, we have to figure out what are the goals that we want to accomplish. And so we've been in the process of doing a strategic plan to try to make sure that we're meeting the needs of our patients in the pulmonary fibrosis community. We have 4 strategic goals that we've identified in working with members of the Care Center Network, as well as patients and caregivers. And these 4 goals can be summarized as, firstly, to improve the diagnostic process; secondly, to enhance the quality of care; third, to accelerate research; and fourth, to effectively advocate for the needs of the pulmonary fibrosis community. We try to achieve these goals through a number of different programs, and I'm going to describe some of them now. But there are many, many that I won't have time to describe, and I'd really encourage you to go to the Pulmonary Fibrosis Foundation website to investigate more about the activities and the efforts of the Care Center Network. So first, the Care Center Network, as you heard, is a group of 68 sites that work together to try to provide the best care possible for pulmonary fibrosis patients and their families. The way we do this is by having committees to focus on specific areas that are of interest and importance to our patient population. I'd like to describe some of the committees and working groups, and certainly if these are things that you find are interesting to you, we also would encourage you to reach out to see how you can become a part of these activities of the Care Center Network. My goal as my goal with the steering committee is to provide guidance and recommendations to the leadership of PFF in terms of how we should effectively interface with the Care Center Network sites. The steering committee has provided important guidance as we develop the strategic goals. And again, it's made up of leaders amongst the 68 Care Center networks, including physicians, nurses and allied health providers, as well as patients and caregivers. So we've tried to incorporate the voice of all of our stakeholders as we think about building our strategic plan. The next committee that I'd like to describe is the benchmarking committee. Now, this is directed by two Care Center Network leads, Dr. Thavaraja and Dr. Bhatt, and its goal is to learn from the Care Center Network sites the best practices for taking care of patients with pulmonary fibrosis, and then to share those best practices with not only other members of the Care Center Network, but with physicians caring for and providers caring for patients across the country. One of the important efforts that we have is to convene working groups. And working groups are groups that are typically present for just short periods of time with a goal of delivering a specific product. One of the recent working groups we've had is a palliative care working group, which I was fortunate to co-chair with Dr. Kathy Lindell. And the goal of this working group was to develop a palliative care position statement to try to describe the role of palliative care in the overall care that we provide to patients who have pulmonary fibrosis. A couple of slides from now, I'm going to actually describe the process that we go through with a working group, so you'll have a better idea of how we come up with the statements that we then make available both to our colleagues in the Care Center Network, our patients in the Care Center, our patients who are cared for in the Care Center Network, and really to physicians and patients across the world. One of our standing committees is a Rural Health Outreach Committee led by Dr. Bascom and Dr. Kulkarni. This is in recognition of the fact that many of our patients live in rural areas where they may have less access to some of the Care Center Network support activities, and trying to identify the best way we can deliver optimal care to patients who are not in urban settings. Again, the purpose of these committees is to really move the field of pulmonary fibrosis across the country and really across the world forward. A recent working group that has been convened by Jessica Shore is one that we heard from our patients. A big issue that had come up is access to medications that have been approved by the FDA, but are expensive medications and may be difficult to access if there's not sufficient support from the insurance companies or support from patient support groups. So Jessica has convened a group of healthcare providers, allied health providers, including pharmacists, as well as advocacy members from the PFF staff to identify gaps in starting antifibrotics, to develop educational materials that we can provide to the Care Center Network sites, and to advocate for patient access to medications. And this is, I think, a really good example of how the Care Center Network can use working groups to be nimble to address new problems or to address gaps that need to be addressed. I'd like to spend a moment talking about a very important part of the Care Center Network. This is the Nurse and Allied Health Network, called the NON. We recognize that the care of patients with pulmonary fibrosis is a multidisciplinary process, and that our nurses and allied health providers, including respiratory therapists, physical therapists, occupational therapists, pharmacists, are an incredibly important piece of the care that we provide our patients. So the mission of NON is to encourage collaboration and professional development amongst our allied healthcare team, and in order to provide patients who are diagnosed with the most exemplary healthcare and to improve patient outcomes. This has been a very important part of the efforts of the Care Center Network because it really recognizes that the care of pulmonary fibrosis patients is a team sport. I'd like to introduce you to some of the work of the Nurse and Allied Health Network. The Nurse and Allied Health Network is actually having an independent meeting during this summit. And so I think it really speaks to the fact that it is a critical component of our Care Center Network. Some of the efforts that are going on currently include the development of a new patient handbook, recognizing that when new patients are diagnosed with pulmonary fibrosis, there can be a tremendous amount of information that needs to be communicated. And by providing education that patients can read on their own time in the way that is most convenient to them with people who matter to them, may help them as they start on their journey with pulmonary fibrosis. There's a monthly journal club to share new knowledge with members of the Nursing and Allied Health Network regarding issues that are relevant to the care of patients with pulmonary fibrosis and interstitial lung disease. There's a mentorship program in order to train new nurses to provide the best care, to teach them some of the lessons that have been learned over time by our more senior nurses who have developed important experience in caring for these patients. As I mentioned, there will be a meeting of the NON at the summit, and there's been an organizing committee to develop the elements of this meeting. I think that'll be a very exciting step with really the development of this independent summit activity. There's a research organization which is really seeking to try to bring research to the NON, both as participants, that is, people who are thinking about how to do research, and also about delivering information about research to our allied health and nursing community in order to allow them to provide that to our patients. And finally, there will also be position statements that will be developed by our Nurse and Allied Health Network that may cover topics that are not topics that were provided by the Care Center Network's primary position statements. I'd like to take the opportunity to tell you a little bit about some of the position statements that we've been discussing. You can see that they cover a wide variety of topics, everything from how to use surgical lung biopsy or high-resolution CT scanning in diagnosis, to the role of genetic counseling and testing in adults with interstitial lung disease. I'd like to spend a couple minutes talking about the palliative care statement and how that statement was developed. The palliative care working group was convened when patients, caregivers, and our care center network members identified that there was a gap in information available on palliative care. Co-chairs were identified and asked to organize working groups for literature review, the development of a survey, and the writing of a statement. This group assembled monthly and included representatives of the CCNs, patients, and caregivers. It was a very long process, but an intense one to try to get to the best answers. The literature was reviewed, we developed a survey, and that was sent to the CCN sites, and I'm proud to say there was a 100% response rate. The executive statements that are available for both patients and providers have been written, and the results of the survey have been made public at the American Thoracic Society in May of 2021. We're going to further share this information through press releases, and these executive statements will be on the PFF website. Our goal is to gather the best information and then share it as broadly as possible. I would like to just end by sharing with you the many people who were involved in the development of the palliative care working group. This was an incredible team effort, and I think really shines a light on what is best about the Care Center Network. And with that, I'd like to end. I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have. And I want to thank you for your interest and involvement with the pulmonary fibrosis, and encourage you to reach out and be a part of the Care Center Network efforts.
All right, well, thank you. We're back here now to answer some questions that you might all have. I'd like to thank my other co-presenters today for joining us. And I would like to start off with a question for the registry, and maybe you could, for Dr. Flaherty and Junelle, talk a little bit about some more of the benefits of the registry and the benefits there are for patients to participate.
Yeah, I think, the registry is a wonderful way to get involved, to try to have data entered and from a large, number of people, so we can try to better understand, the impact of this disease and try to move the research forward.
And to add to that, one of the many benefits of a registry is that it's looking at real world evidence. There's nothing that a patient needs to do. Any additional care, any additional medications. As far as the Care Center registry goes, you go into a care center, you go for your usual care, and that data is later uploaded into the record into the registry. As far as the community registry goes, this is an opportunity for you to have a direct impact by providing your data directly into the registry regarding your diagnosis, your experience of care, and other factors.
Great, thank you. Another question from the audience: how do you enroll into the Care Center registry?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. And enrollment within the Care Center registry, as opposed to the community registry, happens through Care Center Network sites. Right now, that's not open. We will be reopening that after the first of the year. The time is not exactly set, but it'll be sometime after the first of the year. So all I would do is just encourage people to, if you're being seen at a Care Center Network site, to ask your doctor about the registry, and they can give you an update on if it's enrolling and if not, when it might be. You can also keep an eye on the webpage, and we'll put some updates on there as well.
And once that enrollment period begins later next year in 2022, it's not an automatic enrollment. Patients are told about the registry. They're asked to complete informed consent forms, and then it goes from there. So you'll be alerted and you will be aware of whether or not you're in their registry.
Wonderful, thank you. Another question, and I'd like Dr. Flaherty and Junelle for you to take this first, and then maybe Dr. Danoff and I can follow up. Can you give us specific examples how families and caregivers can be great advocates?
Junelle, you want to go first?
Sure, sure. Thank you, Dr. Flaherty. So certainly being part of the registry is being a huge advocate for yourself. Those others within your network, your family who may have the disease, and then the future generations who are affected by pulmonary fibrosis. The community registry, again, presents an excellent opportunity to go in, provide your data directly. Also, if you're part of the Care Center registry, just going in for your regular source of care and providing any additional biosamples and scans will help greatly with amassing numerous data points so that we could advance the research on pulmonary fibrosis.
Yeah, and I would just add beyond the registry, there's other clinical trials that are going on, trying to find new cures, new treatments for various fibrotic lung diseases, and certainly the participants in clinical trials I have the utmost respect for of trying to move those forward. So that's something to consider. Being involved in your community, your local support groups and things is another way to advocate both for yourself but also to help those around you.
Great, thank you. I also think it's really important just to point out that family members, just supporting your loved one who might be affected by pulmonary fibrosis is one way that, you are an advocate for them and you're there present maybe in some of their clinic appointments, supporting them at home, checking in on how they're doing, especially with some of the isolation we've had to face in the last couple years with the pandemic. And so I think being an advocate and just thinking about being an advocate for your loved one is such a critical first step to really supporting your loved one. Dr. Danoff, would you like to add additional?
Absolutely. I just could not agree with Jessica more about that. I think that a big part of being a good advocate for a family member or loved one with pulmonary fibrosis or advocating for yourself is being comfortable with just asking questions. What is my diagnosis? How did you get to the diagnosis? What are my treatment options? So don't ever hesitate to ask your provider to give you information, and also go to the PFF website where you can get information. We also have the help center, and so you can get information, speak to somebody there if there's other issues that you'd like to learn about, because the goal of this is really to learn about your disease, to understand your disease, and to try to get to the best care you possibly can have, and that is through education.
Wonderful, thank you. Junelle, this is for you. If I join the PFF Community Registry, how often will I receive updates from the PFF?
Great question, Jessica. So this time around with the registry on the community side, we'll certainly ask you for data points related to your experience of care and the disease itself. But we also want to provide a feedback loop where monthly we provide email updates to participants. Quarterly, we'll provide a newsletter as well, just noting all of the accomplishments of that community registry to date, whether it's the number of participants that we've amassed, or the research that has been pushed out because of the registry data, or even highlighting a participant. We want to provide that regular communication monthly, quarterly, and then annually. We also have our registry annual report as well. And data and other information will be included on the website as well. So lots of opportunities for information to be shared.
Thank you, Junelle. On that website, would you be able to say it again, what the website is to be able to look up the information about the registry?
Sure. The registry information is at www.pffregistry.org.
Wonderful. Thank you. Dr. Flaherty, would you be able to comment on why the Care Center registry is capped at 2,000 participants?
Yeah, the short answer is finances. It's expensive to run a registry. And if we had unlimited resources, then certainly we could have unlimited participants. So 2,000 is a lot of subjects. Obviously, there's a lot more that could be entered there, but it seemed to be a good balance between resources and having enough information to do some research.
Wonderful. Another question from the audience that I'll take is, what is the Care Center Network's plan for expansion? Well, we know it's critically important to expand the Care Center Network so we can include more providers who are providing the care to patients living with pulmonary fibrosis. And so we plan to, in 2022, to open up the application process. And so we'll go ahead and get that out to a lot of the providers that have already expressed interest in joining the PFF Care Center Network, along with making sure that we distribute it out very broadly so that medical centers are aware. So we're definitely interested in expanding the Care Center network, as we want to be able to capture more patients and providers to be part of the network. Dr. Danoff, do you want to add anything to that? Maybe.
Yeah. Thank you, Jessica. So the one thing I want to add is that we've recognized that a lot of people get excellent care at sites that are not Care Center Network sites, and we don't want to convey the sense that you have to go to a Care Center Network site. We want to let you know that the goal of the Care Center Network sites are to improve care for every patient with pulmonary fibrosis, whether you go to a Care Center Network site or you don't. And so really what we want to do is use the power of this group of sites to try to learn together, do research together, educate each one another, and so that we provide really great care, move care forward, but that we share it widely. So whether you're at a Care Center Network site or not, we want your provider to know these things. Again, I just can't emphasize enough that the PFF website has so much information. All of our statements are there. All of our research work goes onto the Care Center Network site. So please, feel like it is your, your ability to reach out and look at those things yourself and share them with your doctor. If your doctor is not aware of them, share the site with your doctor if your doctor's not aware of it, or if your provider's not aware of it.
Thank you, Dr. Danoff. This is a question for you, Dr. Danoff. Would you be able to talk a little bit more about the position statements, where to find them? And then there was a question specific about genetic counseling and familial IPF.
So if you go to the Pulmonary Fibrosis Foundation website, you'll be able to find the link to get to the position statements. And those include a position statement about genetic testing. But actually, thank you for setting me up, because the next session is going to be on genetic testing and genetic counseling. And so by all means, I'd really encourage you to stay on and listen to one of our genetic counselors who's an expert in this area, provide some great information and guidance about where it might be appropriate to have, when it might be appropriate to have genetic testing, and what can be learned through genetic testing.
Wonderful. Thank you, Dr. Danoff. Following up more specifically to palliative care position statement, would you be able to expand a little bit more about the palliative care position statements that were I know, recently released from the PFF?
Absolutely. So when we develop consensus statements, position statements, we do it because we have been advised by members of the Care Center Network, and by that I mean not just providers, but also our patients and caregivers, that there's a need for more information in an area. And this particular topic was on palliative care, which is the part of medicine which is really focused on symptom management. So not specifically on treating the disease, but on treating the symptoms that come along with the disease. And we know that pulmonary fibrosis can be associated with a lot of very significant symptoms like cough and shortness of breath. So the goal of this group, which included people who were providers, nurses, members of the pulmonary fibrosis patient community, caregivers, was to really provide information on when is it appropriate to offer palliative care in a patient who is in their journey through pulmonary fibrosis. How can you do it? What are the advantages to our patients? And really, how can they access resources to find out more about palliative care? And there are statements that are designed for providers, and there are also statements that are designed for patients. And so, you know, as a patient, you should feel very comfortable going to the site and getting that information for yourself, so you can learn more about it. And you can also maybe educate your physician more about it if they don't know about it, or your provider about it if they don't know about it.
Thank you, Dr. Danoff. Here's a question for all of us. And so what if a patient can't be seen at a care center network, center? What should they do? And specific to the registry, how could they participate still in the registry even if they're not being seen at a CCN?
Yeah, so, that's one of the advantages of the community registry, is that they will still be able to enter data and without having to be at a care center network site. So that's there. And as Dr. Danoff said as well, it is possible to get really good care apart from a care center network site, particularly, looking at the education materials and things of that nature can be helpful.
Wonderful. Dr. Danoff, what recommendations do you have if someone can't be seen at a care center network? What if they're seeing a physician that's really close to their home, a pulmonologist that's close to home?
Sure. I think that, again, our goal, we recognize that the care center network can't possibly be big enough to touch every single patient with pulmonary fibrosis in the United States. And so there are a couple of things. Firstly, there are the communal resources that we have through the PFF website. The second is that our pulmonary fibrosis care center networks also have community partners. We've really conceived of this as a sort of a hub and spoke model, where the hub is the care center network, but the spoke is reaching out to all of the community sites that then refer patients to that CCN site. And so if you go to see your doctor and they're not, and you can ask if they're a care center network site. If they're not, ask them if they're affiliated with a care center network site, and can they access some of the resources through that care center network. And, again, I think that the biggest thing is for patients to arm themselves with as much information as they possibly can, so that they are able to be really full partners in the decision-making around their journey through pulmonary fibrosis, whether that is with a care center network site or with a trusted physician locally.
Yeah, great, thank you. Question for Dr. Flaherty and Junelle. If a patient believes that they were part of the registry in the past, how could they confirm that they are still an active participant? One, and if they're not, what should they do?
Yeah, so they would find out that information by talking to their physician at the Care Center Network site, and they could confirm that they were enrolled Just because your care is provided by a Care Center Network site, you may not be in the registry. You would have to consented and given your permission for people to look at your medical record and pull data for the registry. So the best way would be to talk to your physician or health care provider at the Care Center Network site to see if you are, if you were enrolled in the registry. If you were enrolled in the registry, then you're still there. And if you're still receiving care at that site, the care that you're receiving, your lung function tests, their medications, things like that, would still be entered from the registry, or from the record into the registry.
Great. Thank you. Dr. Danoff, this question is for you. What has the Care Center Network done in response to COVID-19? Is there any special initiatives or projects that you can discuss?
Sure, that's a great example of how the Care Center Network can really harness a lot of people's experience to come together and really try to move something forward. So one of our Care Center Network sites leaders, Lisa Lancaster at Vanderbilt, was very concerned about the impact of COVID-19 on the care of our patients. And so she convened a group of members from the Care Center Network sites, developed a survey to try to understand how it was impacting that group. And she's now in the process of publishing that manuscript to try to help us figure out what worked well, what didn't work well, and how we should think about it if there are other disruptions in our healthcare system. How can we continue to provide the best care to our patients? So I think that that's really a great example of the things that the Care Center Network can do quickly and in response to immediate needs when we all work together.
Thank you. Junelle, this question is for you. How will my data be protected in the PFF Community Registry?
So in the Community Registry, we are using the same security systems as are used in your doctor's practice, in a hospital setting, and other clinical care setting. That data is encrypted, it's de-identified, and there's no identifying information for you within the registry once that information goes over to researchers. So you're pretty secure.
Wonderful, thank you. Well, I would like us to start wrapping it up and thank all of our attendees in the audience for joining us. I'd like to remind everyone that you're able to go into the exhibitor hall and see both the PFF Registry and the PFF Care Center Network booths. And you can find out more about our essential programs here at the PFF and see how you can get involved. Thank you so much for attending. Dr. Danoff, Dr. Flaherty, Junelle, I've really enjoyed being here with you today.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you as well, Jessica, for all you do. And thanks everybody for attending.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.